Everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So you may have heard there's a new Brad Pitt movie out. No, not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I've reviewed here on this channel. You can check out my review, and which I really liked, incidentally. No, I'm talking about another Brad Pitt movie. This one called Ad Astra, and the fact that we've had two movies with him within the space of a month really shows that Brad Pitt is having a moment. I mean, I've always rated him as an actor. I thought he was terrific in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, brilliant in obviously in the likes of Seven and Tree of Life and any number of other movies. And his performance in this received rapturous reviews at the Venice Film Festival recently. So to fill in the plot details, it's an expansive philosophical sci-fi drama directed by James Gray, who made The Lost City of Zed and The Immigrant, who has got a reputation for doing these kind of thoughtful, meditative, steadily paced character dramas. And he now sort of applies these principles to the vastness of space. Brad Pitt is Roy McBride, who is an astronaut who prides himself on being brilliant at his job. More specifically, he prides himself on the fact that his pulse has never ever got above 80. He remains calm in the most drastic of circumstances. They don't get more drastic than when, at the start of the movie, he is working on the space station above the Earth's atmosphere. There is then a giant sort of electrical surge that causes him to hurtle towards the Earth. Down through the atmosphere. He manages to survive that attempt, and then he is filled in by the army top brass as to what actually caused this. It turns out that his absentee, long-lost father, Clifford, played by Tommy Lee Jones, who disappeared off beyond Neptune many years ago when Roy was a youngster, might now be involved in a secretive project called the Lemur Project, which appears to be the source of this surge and which may now be threatening mankind, or maybe it doesn't. And what the authorities want is they want to exploit Brad Pitt's connection with his father. They play on that and they basically go, look, you are the person who is best positioned to go out and find your father and find out what's going on and potentially stop this, what is happening. And he is sent off into deep space on a top secret mission that has potentially global ramifications, but more importantly, it has very specific, intimate and emotional ramifications for Roy himself. So what you've got is a story that James Gray has unashamedly compared to Apocalypse Now. The idea that you have a journey into the heart of darkness, except you have the depth of space replacing the sort of humid, steamy, smoky jungles of Vietnam, but the principle is the same. The idea is you have a landscape which is vast, where you have an environment which is so vast, which somehow mirrors the void, the emotional and personal void within the character himself. Because Brad Pitt's character is very introverted, similar to his character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Actually, he's quite unreadable, stoic, somewhat distant. You get hazy flashbacks to the scenes with Liv Tyler as his wife, and you get a sense almost entirely through the visuals, very little dialogue. It's very well done that all is not well. One assumes because of the Roy McBride's character, the fact that he does not open up, that he is not emotional, and this seemingly is what tees him up to be very good for this mission. They want somebody who is very much in charge of their emotions, going off on this very dangerous mission from which they might not necessarily come back alive, to go all the way up to Neptune and see what's going on. And obviously the fact that he's going towards Neptune means that it calls to mind things like Event Horizon, which I actually really like. Event Horizon, there are B-movie overtones in the back of this unashamedly grandiose existential movie. I mean, there's Event Horizon in there, there's bits of Gravity in there, there's a bit where Brad Pitt kind of flails around on the outside of a structure and is forced to grab on something. That's very like post-Gravity, post-Sandra Bullock in Gravity. You've also got overtones, things like Alien and things like that. I mean, more specifically, what this film, Ad Astra, calls to mind are films like Solaris, the Tarkovsky movie, that unashamedly cerebral, very thoughtful, deep space movies, which aren't action movies. It's about the the unraveling of the character at its center. How, as the character plunges deeper into space, do they reveal more and more of themselves? And Ad Astra hinges very, very much on this really engrossing performance by Brad Pitt as a character who is imperturbable and stoic, and as I said, unreadable. And yet there are cracks in the facade. You see this very early on when he's given the mission briefing about the fact that his father might be involved in this power surge. There is a little flicker on his face. It's very subtle. Brad Pitt can do subtlety really well, as those who've seen The Tree of Life will know. There's a little flicker, and then he composes himself, and you think that is a kind of harbinger of what will happen to the character later on as he gradually starts to become more and more, as his pulse starts to raise, and as he starts to become more and more troubled by the ethics of what he's doing, and more specifically, he starts to become troubled by his own personal demons about what is the relationship that he shared with his father. Played, I have to say, very, very well, largely on video screens, by an incredibly, particularly craggy looking Tommy Lee Jones. I mean, Tommy Lee Jones always looks like that, but this movie uses his face really well. He looks almost like skeletal and demonic in the bits that you see him. And Pitt's character is forced to confront the whole weight of his past and how does it bear on his present. And this grounds what is a fantastical movie. I mean, it's set in the near future. You know, there it is suggested that that mankind has kind of advanced to a stage of outer space exploration that we're clearly not at the moment, but it grounds it in a very, very recognisable human emotion. There is one scene where Pitt is forced to rendezvous with a spaceship on the moon, and the moon is basically turned into the Wild West. It's populated by sort of dangerous cowboy figures in moon rovers who attack people, and basically you have the principles of what happens on Earth, which is basically like exploitation, violence, have just basically been transplanted onto a completely different environment, in this case the moon's surface. The movie is full of these really, really, really intelligent, really well handled ideas, all grounded by Brad Pitt's central performance. It looks gorgeous. It's shot by Hoyt van Hoytema, who shot Interstellar, but whereas Interstellar was obviously the Christopher Nolan film, that had a kind of more utilitarian, kind of practical approach to its space environment. This is much more impressionistic. You get close-ups of Brad Pitt sat in rooms that are geometrically quite odd, with like blood red lighting on his face, and you think, okay, is this foreshadowing some kind of emotional breakdown later on? The Hoyt van Hoytema's cinematography in is brilliant. See it on the biggest screen that you can find. Likewise, Max Richter's score goes from these very kind of subtle, understated pulses to these sort of stately, grandiose, sort of orchestral expressions. Though it is interesting, there are multiple composers credited on the film. If you stay through the end credits, you'll see them. Not just Lorne Balfe, who did the score for Mission Impossible Fallout, but a lot of other composers as well. So I'm not quite sure what the situation is there. It sounds like Max Richter. I mean, anyone who's heard the piece on the nature of daylight from Arrival will recognise the tone of that. But regardless of what the circumstances involved in creating the music, it works really well. It fills the soundscape just as the visuals kind of engulf you and wash over you in this very, very stately, deliberately paced sci-fi drama. It swings for the fences. It threatens to get very earnest and very, very silly, and indeed some of the dialogue is really on the nose. This is a kind of sort of harking back, as I said, to films like Solaris, films like 2001. There is a shot of lighting reflected in Brad Pitt's space helmet, which I thought very, very deliberately called to mind 2001. Unashamedly big, bold sci-fi dramas that deal with very provocative, very cerebral themes. The movie Ad Astra walks a knife's edge between being very thoughtful and very silly, but it always claws it back, again, largely, almost entirely down to Brad Pitt's performance, which is really good. I mean, I'd love to see him get an Oscar nomination for this. It remains to be seen whether he will, and indeed whether he'll get a supporting actor nomination for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Either way, this is kind of his year, really, and you think of also people like Keanu Reeves, who also had a really good year this year as well. Ad Astra is a really, really terrific movie. I think it's one of my favourite films this year. It's bold, it's beautiful, it walks that tightrope of being thoughtful and quite silly and earnest, but always knows where to draw the line. I'd say go and see it on the biggest screen that you can find, and prepare to revel in Brad Pitt's performance. If you do go and see it, it's out in the UK on the 18th of September. Let me know your thoughts here at Kubrick Corner, and I'll see you soon. Bye.